अभिवादन स्वीकार कीजिए नीरज राव का कल्चर क्वांटम के इस अध्याय में. This episode is based on some of the most important topics which are expected to be coming in this year prelims examination from art and culture topic. So let's cover this part related to art and culture most important topics. So the important topic number 1 is classical literature of India. There has been some new addition in the classical literature of India, and moreover, there has also been some sort of modification in the rules which have been laid down by Sahitya Academy for recognizing the classical literature. So the new criteria laid down by Sahitya Academy in 2024 includes, number 1, there must be antiquity of the text. They must be more than 1500 to 2000 years old. Number 2, it must be regarded as heritage by the generation of the speakers of that particular language. Third, there must be knowledge text. What is knowledge text? Basically, there must be prose text apart from the poetry. And it also says that there must be epigraphical and inscriptional evidence of the language. And last but not the least, the classical literature might differ from the today's form of that language. Moreover, it must be distinct from the offshoots of that language in later ages. So these are the 4 criterions which have been decided by Sahitya Academy, and if the languages fulfill these criterions, so they will be enlisted in the classical literature list. So let's talk about which all languages are classical. So Tamil was the very first language which was given classical status in 2004, followed by Sanskrit in 2005, followed by Kannada and Telugu in 2008. Both the languages were given recognition on the same day. Then comes Malayalam in 2013 and Odia in 2014. Last year in 2024, Sahitya Academy has decided to give classical literature status to Marathi language, so as Pali and Prakrit, Assamese and Bengali. As far as the states concerned with these languages, so Marathi language and literature mainly concerns with the Maharashtra, Pali and Prakrit with Bihar, UP and MP, and so as Assamese from Assam and Bengali from Bengal. One more thing I want to add in this part, that Marathi developed from Maharashtri Prakrit, and moreover Assamese and Bengali, they developed from Magadhi Prakrit. Another very important detail I would like to add in this, that Gatha Saptasati, written by one of the Satavahan king, Hala, is believed to be one of the initial example of the Marathi, and it was actually written in Maharashtri Prakrit. Second important topic is also related to languages. Very recently, Google has announced that it will be developing Google Translate of 110 Indian languages, and it has already added some of the Indian tribal languages in the Google Translate, which includes Kokborok of Tripura, and it is the lingua franca of the 19 tribal communities of Tripura. Apart from it, Tulu, Marwadi, Awadhi and Khasi has also been added into Google Translate, and Santhali is already the part of the Google Translate. Another very important information related to Santhali, that perhaps it is the first tribal language of India whose Windows system has been developed in its script, which is called as Olchiki. Ministry of Tribal Affairs of India is developing the digital archives related to the tribal languages of India. It's a very august initiative of the Ministry of Tribal Affairs to protect the endangered tribal languages of India. Important topic number 3. Kozhikode city of Kerala has been recognized as the first literature city of India. The city boasts of more than 500 libraries and more than 70 publications. Fourth important topic is basically manuscript of 3 Indian literature, that is Ramcharitmanas, Panchatantra and Sahardya Lok Lochana, has been recorded in the Language Register of Asia Pacific. It is an initiative of UNESCO which started back in 1992. Moving to important topic number 4. Very recently, UNESCO has recognized Cherav Dev Moirams in Assam in the UNESCO Tangible Heritage List site. Cherav Dev Moirams are basically burial sites of the Ahom Dynasty in the foothills of Patkai hill range. Apart from it, in 2023, 2 more sites were added into UNESCO Heritage List. That includes Santiniketan of West Bengal, and so as the sacred ensembles of the Hoysalas, which includes Hoysaleshwara Temple, Chennakeshava Temple of Somnathpura, and Chennakeshava Temple of Belur. So moving to important topic number 5, and it is based on Buddhism. Very often UPSC has asked questions based on Buddhism, like epithets of the Buddha, which was asked last year, like Sakyamuni, Tathagat. So there are some other famous epithets of the Buddha, like Samyak Sambuddha. What does it mean? That the perfect Buddha, the enlightened Buddha, and the one who is above all of them. So it is an epithet to the Buddha. Then another very important epithet is Sugat. Buddha Ghosh has mentioned that meaning of the Sugat is that Buddha, by both the ways, he was well gone. The exact meaning is well gone. So when he has chosen to come to the earth, that is good. And when he is gone from the earth, that is also good. So the original meaning of the Sugat is well gone, and it is an epithet to the Buddha. Apart from it, Bodhisattvas are also known with many different names like Lokeshwar and Lokasattva. So if in exam it comes that what is Lokasattva, what is Lokeshwar, so it is basically another synonym of the Bodhisattva. Mahasattva, Lokanath, Lokeshwar are the different epithets which are given to Bodhisattvas. So if it comes in exam, identify it as a epithet which are given to Bodhisattvas. Moving on to the next part is basically the Lokottarvad branch of Buddhism. Basically, Lokottarvad means that knowledge of the transcendence. And Lokottarvad was one of the main important branch of Mahasanghika. In fact, there were 3 important branches of Mahasanghika, which includes Bahusrutiya and Pranaptivad. So what is the difference between the 3 branches? Lokottarvad says that Buddha Vachan were transcendent in nature, but Bahusrutiya and Pranaptivad, they say that teachings of the Buddha are both transcendent and provisional. So remember that teachings of the Buddha are transcendent and provisional in Bahusrutiya and Pranaptivad. Another very important theme from the Buddhism is Madhyamika philosophy. Nagarjuna was the founder of the Madhyamika philosophy, and it is basically elaboration of the middle path which has been prescribed by Buddha. So he was the main philosopher, he was the founder, but Aryadev was also one of the important contributor to the Madhyamika philosophy, which was initiated by Nagarjuna. So the important work of Nagarjuna in which this philosophy is mentioned is called as Madhyamak Karak, or it is also known as Madhyamak Sastra. Another very important Buddhist scholar is Dignag. There was a question based on him last year. So Dignag is known for establishing school of logic, Hetu Vidya in Buddhism, which gets some sort of inspiration from the Nyaya school of Hinduism. Dignag is also known for writing 3 momentous works, and these works are Pramana Samuchaya, Alamban Pariksha, and Nyaya Mukha. So today you learnt about some of the important topics which are expected to be coming in this year exam, and I hope it comes and it helps you a lot in clearing the prelims examination. But I have some suggestion from my side that you must read. This year was the year of the Mahakumbh, so please read Mahakumbh, and moreover, you can also go and look at the Mahakumbh video covered by Culture Quantum. Then apart from it, you can also read some of the epithets of the Mahavir like Nigantha and Nayaputta. So Nigantha means that the one who was without clothes, and Nayaputta is indicative of his Janantrika clan. So these topics you must read additional to what we are covering over here. Moreover, you can also refer to the book A Journey Through Indian Art and Culture, written by me and Anutosh. So it will help you a lot. And one very important thing, that these all topics that I have covered, my own handwritten notes, I would be uploading in my Telegram channel, that is t.me Culture Quantum. So be connected to Culture Quantum Telegram channel also to get the notes of this particular topic. So next video we are going to come up with important topics from modern Indian history and some remaining important topics from ancient and medieval history. Large number of the gods and goddess in Rig Veda, worship of god and goddess both. So in Vajrayana Buddhism, there is mention of many goddesses. Shranga is considered as bow and arrow, tir or dhanush. Chandragupta II, the Gupta ruler. Moreover, Amar Simha was also contemporary of Kalidas. Vidya Sundar is based on the love story of Vidya and Sundar, that he was the first Muslim scholar who started using, bring more participation of the private sector in school education. Hello viewers, warm welcome to all of you. In the series of most important and predictable topics from art and culture in UPSC Prelims 2025. This video is continuation with the first release video on important themes from art and culture. So you must see first video also, and this is the second one. So अभिवादन स्वीकार कीजिए नीरज राव का कल्चर क्वांटम के इस अध्याय में. Let's start the most important topics for UPSC Prelims 2025. Very often in the recent past, what we have seen that many questions have been asked from the Vedic period, in mains examination also and in prelims examination also. So when it comes to the Vedic age, or particularly the early Vedic age, there has been mention of large number of the gods and goddess in Rig Veda. So let's discuss about some of the important goddess from Rig Veda. Very first one, Usha. Usha is considered as a beautiful goddess. She is associated with the sunrise or dawn, and her name is mentioned many a times in Rig Veda. The second important goddess from the Rigvedic period is Aditi. Aditi is considered as mother of sun god, and she is also associated with the proceedings of the day. Third important Rigvedic goddess is Sinivali, and she is associated with fertility and also the protection of the children. Then another very important Rigvedic goddess is Raka. She is considered as the goddess of the full moon, or she is the goddess of the moon. Likewise, Hinduism. In some of the branches of the Buddhism, there is mention of the polytheistic practices. That means worship of God and goddess both. So in Vajrayana Buddhism, there is mention of many goddesses. For example, Tara, Mahamayuri, Akshobhaya. But one goddess she is often mentioned in the Buddhist text is Hariti. Hariti believed to be she was demoness, and she used to devour the children's. But as per the belief in the Buddhism, later on she was converted by Buddha and she became a goddess of the good purpose. Now her function got related with the protection of the children and moreover fertility. You must have noted that many questions in UPSC paper, particularly from art and culture and ancient and medieval history, are based on some terms and terminologies. So one of the term and terminology related to the bow and arrow, and what name has been mentioned related to bow and arrow in the culture and the history of India. So let's start with the very first one, that is Shranga. Shranga is considered as bow and arrow, tir or dhanush of Lord Vishnu. Similarly, Lord Ram is often depicted with bow and arrow, and Lord Ram's bow and arrow is called as Kodanda. Then apart from it, you must have heard about zodiac sign Sagittarius. And zodiac sign Sagittarius also depicts some bow and arrow which is called as Karmaka. Apart from bow and arrow, other weapons are also depicted in the Indian literature or Hindu literature. For example, Kunta, which is javelin, has been often depicted in the Hindu literature, and many of the gods are depicted with the Kunta also. For example, Bhagwan Kartikeya or God Kartikeya is also depicted with the Kunta. One very important personality from the Indian history and culture is Katyayana. And Katyayana can be placed somewhere in 3rd century BCE. So as far as the Katyayana timeline is concerned, before him was the Padini, and then is the Katyayana, and then Patanjali. So Katyayana was a grammarian, and moreover he was a Sanskrit literary figure. Apart from it, he was also a mathematician. And the notable works of the Katyayana are in the field of mathematics, Sanskrit grammar, and so as the astrology. So some of the books authored by Katyayana includes Vartika Kar and Salva Sutras and Vyakaran. So these are the three notable works. Once again, I am repeating that he wrote Vartika Kar, Vyakaran and Salva Sutras. Moreover, his Salva Sutra is basically a commentary on Padini's Astadhyay. Moving ahead with further information related to Katyayana, that as you know, very frequently UPSC asks questions related to the timeline. So timelines are generally asked in ancient medieval section, but it can be asked related to the personalities also. So when it comes to standout personalities from Sanskrit grammar in the ancient Indian scenario, the first name which will come to the fore would be Padini. Then he was followed by Katyayana, and then after Patanjali, who wrote Mahabhashya, which was a commentary on Padini's Astadhyay, and the last would be the Amar Simha, who wrote Amar Kos. And Amar Simha was the courtier of Chandragupta II, the Gupta ruler. Moreover, Amar Simha was also contemporary of Kalidas. Next important theme from art and culture, which can be expected to be coming in this year exam, is basically some of the Bengali literature. As you know, the Bengali language has been given classical status last year, and so as some of the important literature becomes important. Very first one is Dharma Mangal. Dharma Mangal is medieval Bengali poetry based on Mangal Kavya. And what is Mangal Kavya? It is basically the appreciation and celebration of the folk deities of the Bengal. Another very important medieval Bengali literature is Vidya Sundar. Vidya Sundar is a poem which has been written by many authors in Bengal, but all the authors, they have followed the style of Chaur Panchasika, which was written by Kashmiri Pandit Billana. And Vidya Sundar is based on the love story of Vidya and Sundar, and it has erotic elements also. Moving on to the next important literature from the Bengali language from the medieval period, and particularly middle of the 18th century, is Shiva Sankirtan. And Shiva Sankirtan is also called as Sibayan. It was written by Ramakrishna Bhattacharya. And as the name suggests that it is related to Shiva Sankirtan, but the major theme of Shiva Sankirtan is based on the agrarian practices which were prevalent in Bengal during the middle of the 18th century, and so as the previous ages also. Next important theme is based on Akbar. Very often people get confused that what is Akbar Nama and what is Aine Akbari. Is Aine Akbari part of Akbar Nama or Akbar Nama part of Aine Akbari? Are they same or are they different? So let's clear this particular confusion related to the Akbar Nama and Aine Akbari. Aine Akbari is the part of Akbar Nama. Moreover, Akbar Nama is the biography of Akbar, which was written by one of his closest friend, Abul Fazl. And there are three parts of Aine Akbari. Volume 1 and Volume 2 are purely related to the Akbar's life from birth until he becoming the king of India. But the Volume 3 is Aine Akbari, and it reflects on the administrative practices during the Akbar's period, his initiatives related to the administration, and apart from it, Aine Akbari also reflects on the different practices which were prevalent in India. For example, one interesting take in Aine Akbari is Akbar prescribing people to practice Ayurveda. And in fact, though it is not a vivid description of Ayurveda, but some of the benefits of the Ayurveda has been enlisted in Aine Akbari. After the establishment of Delhi Sultanate in north and northwestern India, patronage to the Sanskrit literature declined. But Sanskrit continued as the language of the intellectuals, and in many of the hilly areas and the hilly kingdoms, Sanskrit was patronized. In this series, the most important name from the medieval period is the ninth ruler of the Kashmir Sultanate, Zainul Abidin, who ruled in between 1418 to 1470. He is considered as the father of cultural renaissance in Kashmir, and he patronized many of the Sanskrit poets of that time. Moreover, at this particular time, it is seen that influence of the Persian and Arabic literature on Sanskrit literary things. For example, Bhattavatar wrote Jain Vilas, which is basically the history of rulers of Kashmir, and Bhattavatar in Jain Vilas, he has followed Firdausi's Shahnama writing style. He was not the only Sanskrit author who was patronized by Jainal Abdin. In fact, another very important Sanskrit literary figure from this period was Jonaraj. And Jonaraj, under the patronage of Jainal Abidin, wrote Rajatarangini Dvitiya or Dvitiya Rajatarangini. So, first Rajatarangini was written by Kalhana, which is also the history of the rulers of the Kashmir. And this is the continuation of the first Rajtarangini, which continues with the history of the rulers of the Kashmir, particularly in the medieval period. After the Jonaraj, another very important literary figure who was patronized by Jainal Abidin was Srivara. And Srivara has also followed the Persian style in Sanskrit poetry writing. For example, in his poetry Katha Kautuk, which is based on the love story of Yusuf and Zulaikha, he followed the Persian style of Sanskrit poetry. Moreover, Srivar is also known for writing Raj Tarangini Tritiya, which is also the continuation of the history of the rulers of the Kashmir. In the early medieval times, Advait Vedant philosophy was propounded by Sankaracharya, Adi Sankaracharya, who was born in Kerala in the 8th century AD. And Sankaracharya is famous for his intellectual debate with the Mandan Mishra. Now, after this entire thing has happened, one very important philosopher who emerged in 9th century AD and he continued till 10th century AD was Vachaspati Mishra. He was also one of the philosophers of Advait Vedant. And moreover, he did a tremendous work by harmonizing the thoughts of Mandan Mishra with the thoughts of Sankara. Apart from it, it is also said that Vachaspati Mishra is associated with the Bhamati school or Brahmati Prasthan. And this Bhamati Prasthan is associated with Vachaspati Mishra. And moreover, it is based on the commentaries on Sankara's Brahma Sutra Bhasya. As far as the writings of the Vachaspati Mishra is concerned, he wrote Tattva Bindu, which is one of the most important philosophical work of that time. And what is Tattva Bindu? Drop of knowledge. Amir Khusro was one of the profound personalities of Delhi Sultanate period. He was a court poet of Balban and then he continued during the tenure of Alauddin Khilji also, and he also saw the rule of the Tughlaqs. He is a great literary figure. In fact, he authored near about 99 books. His books were in Urdu language also and so as in the Persian language. The speciality of Amir Khusro is that he was the first Muslim scholar who started using the Indian idioms, words and phrases in Urdu literature and Persian literature. So just the way that Persian literature has influenced some of the Sanskrit writings in Kashmir, similar way that Sanskrit has inspired some of the writings of Amir Khusro. Some of the books, let's mention that some of the important notable works of Amir Khusro, for example, Nusifir, in which he has mentioned about the climate, topography, beauty of India, and he has expressed his love for India. Another very important work of Amir Khusro is Hast Behist. So, meaning of the Hast Behist is 8 paradises, which is basically the Islamic conception of the paradise or heaven. Apart from it, he wrote Tughlaq Nama. Tughlaq Nama is based on the life and the tenure of the Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq. Then he also wrote Khizain ul Futuh. In Khizain ul Futuh, he mentions about the tenure of Alauddin Khilji. In Sikandar Nama, or basically we can say Aine Sikandari, he has mentioned about the tenure of the Alexander. Apart from it, he also wrote one very famous book, Deval Rani Khijr Khani, which is based on unfortunate fate of Deval Rani, who was married to the son of Alauddin Khijr Khan. Apart from it, he also wrote Laila Majnu, though it is not his original authorship. Laila Majnu was already written by many authors in the Middle East, but the Persian and the Urdu version was written by Amir Khusro. So, remember the writings of the Amir Khusro, there could be a possibility that some of the books of the Amir Khusro can be asked in this year prelims. In the recent past, government has come up with many initiatives related to education. Some of the important schemes related to education are Nistha. Nistha is integrated teachers training program. Then comes Vidyanjali. Vidyanjali is a program initiated by MHRD and it aims to bring more participation of the private sector in school education. Then comes Vidya Parvez. Vidya Parvez is basically an initiative for school prep. Basically, it's a kind of a kids school initiative whereby 3-month program would be there for the kids who are about to be getting enrolled in the normal class scenario. Then comes another very important program, Diksha. So Diksha scheme of the government is associated with the digital repository creation for the learning of the students from the different fields and that from different parts of the country. In first important theme video based on art and culture, we talked about some of the textbooks from India included in the World Memory Register, which is an initiative of UNESCO started in 1992. So, previous week, UNESCO has announced that it is going to add Bhagavad Gita and Natya Shastra in the UNESCO World Memory Register. Bhagavad Gita, as you all know, it is the teachings of the Lord Krishna to Arjuna related to the observation of the Dharma. And Natya Shastra is an epic treatise on dance, drama and music which was authored by Bharat Muni. So add with it that what was covered in the previous video and please revise those videos also. So apart from the 2 important videos on art and culture this year, please go to the last year important topics which were predicted to be coming in the 2024 exam, because some you can expect in this year paper also. So with this note, I hope that these videos are going to help you a lot in this year prelims paper. And to download the notes of these videos, please join the Telegram channel t.me/culturequantum. अभिवादन स्वीकार करिए नीरज का कल्चर क्वांटम के इस अध्याय में. In this episode of the Culture Quantum, we are going to discuss some of the important topics which are relevant to the upcoming exams and the recent exam which is to be conducted on 16th of June, UPSC Civil Services Prelims exam. So let's go ahead with this particular important topic journey. One of the frequently asked topic is the edicts and inscriptions of the Ashoka. There are total 33 inscriptions of the Ashoka which can be categorized into minor rock inscriptions, major rock inscription, major pillar inscriptions, minor pillar inscriptions and so as the cave inscriptions. In majority of his inscriptions, Ashoka has mentioned himself as Devanam Piya Piyadasi, which means beloved of the gods. And long before the inscriptions of Ashoka deciphered, nobody knew that who was this Devanam Piya Piyadasi. Because in the inscriptions of Ashoka, it's very rare that his name was mentioned. In the initially discovered inscriptions, only Devanam Piya Piyadasi was mentioned. So, James Prinsep, who deciphered Brahmi and Kharoshthi script, and these scripts were in the Prakrit language, he was also confused that whose name is Devanam Piya Piyadasi. And he got a clue, and this clue was from Sri Lankan Chronicle of Deepavams and Mahavams, which has mentioned that Devanam Piya Piyadasi is the name of the great king Ashoka. So from here the mystery was solved that Devanam Piya Piyadasi was the name of Ashoka and the source is the Sri Lankan text of the Deepavams and Mahavams. Moving ahead, there are 4 inscriptions of Ashoka where his name Ashoka is mentioned, not Devanam Piya Piyadasi. And these inscriptions are Nittur, Udagulam, Maski and Gurjara. These minor inscriptions of the Ashoka were created in the internal parts of the Ashoka's territory, and the 14 major rock inscriptions were on the borders of his territory or the frontiers of his territory. It's a very important thing to note down that the major rock inscriptions were on the frontiers of his territory. In the last phase of the Ashoka's campaign of Dhamma, 7 major pillar inscriptions were added, and as I mentioned, please note it down that it was the last phase when the 7 pillar inscriptions were created. Then comes the 3 cave inscriptions. So these 3 cave inscriptions are in Barabar hills of Gaya, or right now the district is Jahanabad in Bihar. The cave inscriptions are located at Sudama caves, Karan Chopper cave and Vishwakarma cave of Bihar. Apart from it, Kandhar inscription of Asoka is the most unique, and it is the only bilingual inscription of Asoka which is written in Greek and Aramaic language. Then coming to the language and the script of the Ashokan inscriptions or Mauryan inscriptions. So the language and the script of the Ashokan inscription, majorly it was in the Prakrit language and Brahmi script, but then Kharoshthi script was also used. As far as the frontiers of the Ashoka's territories are concerned, so Greek language, Aramic language and Greek and Aramic inscriptions were all for this exam is the Ellora cave. Ellora cave has total 34 caves, 17 belonging to Hinduism, 12 to Buddhism and 5 to Jainism. So the Buddhist caves are full of the many specimens of the Buddhism. And one of the interesting fact about the Ellora cave, that cave premise number 10 of Ellora is known as Vishwakarma cave. But as you might be expecting that it may be dedicated to the Hindu god Vishwakarma, but actually it is dedicated to the Buddha, who is regarded as the craft god in Buddhism, as he is also regarded as the craft god in Hinduism. So please make a note of it. Whenever you are asked in exam that about Vishwakarma cave of the Ellora, so mark it Buddhist cave, not the Hindu cave. Then another very interesting fact about the Ellora cave is basically it is the first site in India where Ashtabodhisattva Mandal is represented. And what is this Ashtabodhisattva Mandal? That Buddha is in the middle and he is surrounded by 8 Bodhisattvas. Some of the important Bodhisattvas are Vajrapani, Padampani, Avalokiteshvara, Akasgarbh, Kshittigarbh and Manjushri and Maitreya. So these Bodhisattvas are represented. Moreover, who are Bodhisattvas? So as I hope you must be knowing or you must have studied that Bodhisattvas are regarded as the previous birth of the Buddha. They are capable of achieving nirvana, but they postpone their own nirvana so that they can help all the sentient beings. And in many lifetimes when they have helped large number of the sentient beings, so they naturally progresses to the path of the Buddhahood. Another very important and interesting fact about the Ellora, that it was the center of the Vajrayana Buddhism, which is the Tantric Buddhism. And many of the practices of the Ellora are very similar to the practices of Tantricism in the Hinduism. Apart from it, another interesting feature is presence of the female deities who are represented in the Ellora caves. For example, the images and the sculptures of the Tara. And Tara is the symbol of the energy and she is considered as the counterpart of the Avalokiteshvara. So Avalokiteshvara is the Lord who looks down with the compassion. Apart from it, there are other female deities are also represented. Second most important is the Mahamayuri. And as far as Vajrayana Buddhism is concerned, please do remember that Vajrayana Buddhism developed in the universities or the Buddhist Mahavihars of Nalanda and Vikramshila. And it is from this particular area that Vajrayana Buddhism has made its traverse in the center. An earthen pot is kept and there are many holes in this earthen pot. And in this particular earthen pot, a diya or the lamp is placed and the light of the diya is coming out from the holes. So basically, what is the importance of this earthen pot? It is the representative of the Garbha, and Garbha is the reason why it is called as Garbha or Garbha. So this earthen pot is representative of the energy of the Shakti or Ma Amba, and people dance around this earthen pot in anti-clockwise fashion, and this performance continues for 9 days, and so as performance includes the recitation of the songs and some sort of mantras. Another very important fact to note down is Garba must not be confused with the Dandiya. Dandiya is a separate performance, it is not at all related to Garba. So please make a note of it. And I believe that this is an important topic which could be asked in this year exam. Moving on to next important topic for this year exam is the UNESCO Tangible Cultural Heritage Site, which was recently included in the list from India, and that is Santiniketan. So Santiniketan made its entry into the tangible list in year 2023. Santiniketan was actually founded by Rabindranath Tagore in 1901. Santiniketan was designed to be the center of art and the center of education, and in fact it has played a very vital role in the growth of the Bengal School of Art. In the present time, Santiniketan is better known as Vishwa Bharati University Shantiniketan Bolpur area of the Bengal. One very interesting fact about the Santiniketan is applicable. I'm again re-emphasizing on it. It is not applicable in the schools of philosophy. In the school of philosophy, Astika means belief in the divine authority of the Veda, and in the schools of philosophy, Nastika means rejection or refutation of the divine authority of the Veda. So the 6 schools of philosophy, or the orthodox schools of philosophy, which accepted the divine authority of the Veda are Sankhya, Yoga, Nyaya, Vaisesika, Mimamsa and Vedanta. On the other hand, the heterodox philosophy, that is Nastika philosophy, includes Buddhism, Jainism, Charvak and Ajivika. And once again I am emphasizing, please note it down, that Nastika means refutation of the belief in the Veda or rejection in the divine authority of the Vedas. It has nothing to do with the belief in the God. So moving on to another interesting aspect of the 6 orthodox schools of philosophy is the creation of the yugma in this philosophy. So for example, Sankhya and Yoga are considered as a yugma, Nyaya Vaisesika are considered as a yugma, and Mimamsa Vedanta are considered as a yugma. But what is this concept of the yugma? Basically, there is some sort of similarity between the 2 schools of philosophy, and that's why they are considered as yugma. So for example, when it comes to Sankhya and Yoga, they are a yugma on the basis of acceptance of the concept of the Purusha and Prakriti. Coming down to the Nyaya and Vaisesika, both of them are considered to be the school of logic, that is their similarity. And the last one, that is Mimamsa and Vedanta. So Mimamsa is also called as Purva Mimamsa, and Vedanta is also called as Uttar Mimamsa. So their similarity is basically with the naming itself. And the word Mimamsa means reflection. So these 2 philosophies are reflections on the Vedas. So Mimamsa is the early reflection on the Veda, and Vedanta is the end reflections on the Veda. That's why they are called as yugma in the orthodox philosophy. So please do remember, Sankhya Yoga is a yugma, Nyaya Vaisesika is a yugma, and Mimamsa Vedanta is a yugma. Coming to the heterodox philosophies, Buddhism, Jainism, Charvak and Ajivika are in this category. But Buddhism and Jainism are different from the Ajivika and Charvaka. So what is this difference? So basically, Buddhism and Jainism, like the other orthodox schools of philosophy, believe in the rebirth and salvation, but Charvakas completely reject the concept of salvation, and Ajivikas considered the concept of salvation as a fallacy. Another very important fact of the Astika school or Six Orthodox philosophy that you must remember, that if you get a question whereby if they are asking that they believe in birth, rebirth, death, soul, salvation, so please mark it correct. All the Astika schools, all the Six Orthodox schools of philosophy, they believe in the divine authority of Veda, they believe in the concept of soul, they believe in the rebirth, and they talk about the salvation. So please remember it. Another important topic that you all must be taking into the consideration is the temple architecture of India. So let's have a quick review of the temple architecture of India. So the temple architecture of India has a vivid variety, but some important styles are Nagar style, Dravid style, Vesar style, and Hoysal style. As far as the Nagar style is concerned, it was mainly practiced in the northern part of India, and the interesting and the important or the characteristic feature of the Nagar style is the presence of the curvy linear tower Sikhar. Another thing to be noted down, that in the Nagar style generally the boundary walls were not created, and in the beginning the temples were created on the banks of the river. That's why in majority of the Nagar temples you may not find any water tank tradition. Exceptions could be there, but this is the general conception. Another thing is to be noted down, that the temples were created according to the concepts or the laws or the dharmas mentioned in the Vastu Shastra and Vishnu Dharmottar Puran. Another thing is to be noted down, be it the Nagar or the Dravid style, the tower of the temple, that is Shikhar or Viman, it is considered as equivalent to the Kailas Parvat or the Meru Parvat, which is mentioned in the Hindu literature. Another important fact to be noted down in the temple architecture, be it any style, is the Garbhagriha. As the name itself suggests, Shiva Jyotirlingas in Maharashtra. Then moving on to southern India, Mallikarjun is the Shiva Jyotirlinga in Andhra, and Sri Rameshwaram is the Shiva Jyotirlinga in Tamil Nadu. Coming to the eastern India, in Jharkhand, Vaidyanath of the Devghar is another Shiva Jyotirlinga. And moving on to Madhya Pradesh. So in Madhya Pradesh there are two Shiva Jyotirlinga, one is the Omkareshwar and another is the Mahakaleshwar of Ujjain. Then another Shiva Jyotirlinga is in UP, which is Kashi Vishwanath of Varanasi. And last but not the least, very important Shiva Jyotirlinga is the Kedarnath in Uttarakhand. Another very important concept to be noted down is the concept of the Char Dham. Please don't be confused that Char Dham is associated with many deities. Char Dham is only associated with the Lord Vishnu. So what are these four places? So these four places are Jagannath Puri, Badrinath, Dwarka and Rameshwaram. Let's understand the concept of the Char Dham. Dwarka is the place where Lord Vishnu is the Raja. Badrinath is the place where Lord gets into his slumber, or it is his last few years, there hasn't been question from the Indo-Islamic architecture, which means that it is an important topic for this year. So let's revise the features of the Indo-Islamic architecture. It is also called as the arcuate architecture because the arch and dome method of the construction was followed in this particular style of the architecture. The beginning of this style of architecture happened after the establishment of the Delhi Sultanate in 1206. So what are the important features? So the important features are use of brick, limestone and mortar. Apart from it, domes were the central features of the architecture of the Indo-Islamic style. Moreover, domes were not unique to India, but it also existed in the ancient times. For example, it can be said that the domes of Indo-Islamic style may have had some inspiration from the Buddhist stupas. Moving ahead, the other interesting feature of the Indo-Islamic style is the decoration through geometrical designs, arabesque designs and paitra dura technique of decoration. Apart from it, they created intricate jalis or beautiful stone tracery work to further enhance the aesthetics and the beauty of the buildings. Another thing is to be noted down that Indo-Islamic architecture avoided the presentation of the human forms on their building, as the human representation is avoided in Islam. Then another interesting aspect or unique or important aspect of the Indo-Islamic architecture is writing of the verses from the Holy Quran, the Hadith and the Sunnah on the walls of the shrines, mosque or religious buildings. In fact, one of the very unique and interesting fact is Taj Mahal has near about 1 kilometer of the calligraphy or the verses which are written to the failures of your life. Failures of your life are just a lesson to understand that what you must not repeat and you must look on to what you can do. So in this episode of the Culture Quantum, we discussed some of the important topics for the upcoming exam, and I hope that the session would be highly useful to you. Hello viewers. I can very well understand that now it is high time and your exam is coming near. In your UPSC exam, I can understand that most of you are a bit fearful about the section of the history, particularly ancient and medieval history, modern history, and so as topics of art and culture. So you are perplexed what to read, what not to read. To solve your problem, to be little helpful in your preparation, Culture Quantum is going to come up with the most probable topics of ancient, medieval, art and culture and modern Indian history. अभिवादन स्वीकार कीजिए नीरज राव का कल्चर क्वांटम के इस अध्याय में, जो कि है आधारित most important topics from history in UPSC Prelims Exam 2025. So let's start with the most important topics of ancient and medieval. As far as ancient and medieval is concerned, one of the area which is often asked in exam about many of the regional dynasties, and today Culture Quantum is going to pick up the topic of regional dynasties in between 200 AD to 8th century AD, and basically those dynasties which are in the Gupta age and so as in the post-Gupta age. So let's start. One very important regional kingdom who were the contemporaries of the Gupta are the Vakatakas of Deccan, who mostly ruled from Maharashtra and parts of Madhya Pradesh and also touching the parts of Andhra, Telangana, so as Chhattisgarh. So Vakataka dynasty was founded by Vindhya Sakti somewhere around 250 AD. It is exactly the same timeline when Sri Gupta has founded Gupta dynasty. After the first ruler Vindhya Sakti, the most important ruler was his son only, whose name was Pravar Sen. And actual expansion of that territory has happened under Pravar Sen. But after the end of tenure of the Pravar Sen, Vakataka kingdom got divided into two branches, which is Pravar Pura Nandi Vardhana branch, basically based in area of Nagpur and Wardha, and then the branch of Vats Gulma, which is basically the area of Wasim in modern Maharashtra. As far as the first branch, that is Pravarpura Nandi Vardhana is concerned, one of its ruler was Rudra Sen II, and Rudra Sen II was married to daughter of Chandragupta II Prabhavati Gupta. Around 385 AD, death of Rudra Sen II happened in an unfortunate way, but it led to Prabhavati Gupta becoming the de facto ruler of Vakataka kingdom of the first branch under the guidance of her father Chandragupta II. Prabhavati was blessed with two sons, and these two sons were Divakar Sen and Damodar Sen. But it is the Divakar Sen who is also known as Pravar Sen II, and he is regarded as one of the most important ruler of the Vakataka dynasty. So let me tell you one unique fact about the Pravar Sen II. Unique fact is that most of the inscription in India, they are belonging to Ashoka, but the second most number of the inscription belong to Pravar Sen II. Another branch of Vakatakas was Vats Gulma branch, as I said earlier. So the ruler of the Vats Gulma branch, Hari Sen, he is the one who annexed the first branch and amalgamated the two branches in 480 AD. And then this dynasty continued somewhere till 550 AD, which is exactly similar to the end of the Guptas also. As far as the contribution of the Vats Gulma branch is concerned, this is the branch which patronized Ajanta and Ellora caves. Many of the premises were patronized by either the rulers of the Vats Gulma branch or their ministers. And as you know, that these two sites are one of the UNESCO heritage site and famous for their beauty and their aesthetic. Coming to another very important dynasty during the Gupta's rule, that is Abhiras. Abhiras, their origin is considered to be somewhere around 203 AD, but their exact beginning is said to be from the 315 to 370 AD. And Ishwar Sen is believed to be the initial ruler of this dynasty. As far as the area of this dynasty is concerned, they ruled vast area in Maharashtra and so as the parts of the Gujarat, so as the parts of Madhya Pradesh. In nutshell, it can be said that they ruled the Konkan part or the coastal part of Western Ghats. One important fact about the Abhira dynasty is that their history is shrouded in much of obscurity and not many details are available about it. But there is a one detail which is mentioned in the famous Allahabad inscription or Prayagraj inscription of Samudragupta. Samudragupta mentions that he defeated Abhiras, and moreover he also mentions Abhiras as the frontier coastal kingdom of India, and he also mentions that after the defeat they were paying him taxes. As far as the end of this dynasty is concerned, they lost some part of their kingdom to Kadambas and Vakatakas, but they were completely replaced by Traikutakas. They were also one of the frontier dynasty. So let's talk about who were Traikutakas. Trekutaka dynasty ruled northern Konkan in between 388 to 550 AD. Indradutt was the initial ruler of this dynasty and he is the founder. As far as this Trekutaka name is concerned, Kalidas in his momentous work, Raghuvamsam, he has mentioned Trikuta Parvat. So they trace their name from the Trikuta Parvat, which is three-peaked mountain. And this three-peaked mountain is present in the Konkan area. Moving ahead, Dhar Sen was the most important ruler of this dynasty who has expanded this kingdom. But as far as the decline of this kingdom is concerned, it was annexed by the Vishnukundin ruler Madhav Varma II. Trekutaka dynasty ruled in between 388 AD to 550 AD. The next not so very well known regional dynasty during the Gupta rule was Salankayana. Salankayanas ruled in between 300 to 440 AD and they basically ruled between area of Godavari and the Krishna river. In fact, it is the Salankayanas who have been mentioned in Geography of Ptolemy, which was written around 140 AD. And it is the Ptolemy who has mentioned that Salankayanas were the inhabitants of the region between Godavari and Krishna river. Moreover, not many records are available about the Salankayanas, but the most important and the first ruler was Hastivarman, and Hastivarman was defeated by Samudragupta. So once again, it is the Samudragupta's Allahabad pillar inscription or Prayagraj pillar inscription which mentions that he defeated Hastivarman of Salankayana, and moreover, Salankayana ruler Hastivarman agreed to pay the taxes to Samudragupta. Another thing which is important about the Salankayana dynasty, that it is a Brahmin dynasty which traces its name from a Brahmin sage whose name was Salankayan. Another very important regional dynasty at the time of the Guptas is Vishnukundins, who ruled in the Tri-Junction area of the Andhra, Telangana and Odisha. They ruled in between 420 to 624. As far as the initial founder is concerned, Madhav Varma first was the initial founder. Madhav Varma first has some sort of confrontation with the Vakataka rulers, but in the end it resulted into matrimonial alliance between the two kingdoms. Moving on to the next information about the Vishnukundins is that Vishnukundins were defeated by the Chalukya ruler Pulakesin II in 616 AD. But later on, it is the brother of the Pulakesin II whose name is Vishnuvardhan who defeated Vishnukundins completely, and then he annexed their capital Vengi, and that's how the emergence of the eastern branch of the Chalukyas has happened at this time, which ruled from the area of the Vengi. So the reality is that Vengi was the initial capital of Vishnukundin. Another very important dynasty is Saravapuriya dynasty, which ruled in between 5th to 6th century AD. They were initially vassals of Gupta or feudatories of the Gupta, but after the decline of the Guptas in 5th and 6th century AD, they became independent rulers of Odisha and Chhattisgarh area. Sripura was the capital of dynasty, and moreover, Sarabha was the first ruler of this dynasty. By faith, they were the devotee of the Lord Vishnu. Vaishnavite tradition was very popular in Sarapuriya dynasty, and moreover, they were worshippers of the Krishna Vasudev. They created many premises dedicated to the Krishna Vasudev. Another very important dynasty in the post-Gupta age was the Nala dynasty, which ruled in between Chhattisgarh and Odisha, and basically their core area was the Bastar and Koraput district of the Odisha. Bhavat Varman or Bhavadat Varman was the initial ruler of this dynasty, who is remembered from his Rithapur copper inscription. In this inscription, an interesting fact is mentioned that he and his queen, they visited to Prayag for Sangam participation, or basically it is all about the participation in the Kumbh. Moreover, Skanda Varman was the last ruler of this dynasty. This dynasty right from the beginning had confrontation with the Vakatakas, which is believed to be the reason of their decline. Another popular dynasty from the post-Gupta age are the Pandu Vamsis of Mekhala and Pandu Vamsis of Dakshin Kosala. So let's talk about the Pandu Vamsis of Mekhala. They derived their name from the Maikal hill range, and they basically ruled in the area in between Amarkantak hills and the Maikal hills. It is a lunar dynasty which traces its origin from the legendary Pandavas of Mahabharata. As far as the foundation of this dynasty is concerned, Jayabala was the initial founder of this dynasty. And The Mekhala branch ruled in between 6th century to 7th century AD. Then comes the second branch of the Pandu Vamsis, that is Dakshin Koshala. It is basically the Shipur area of Chhattisgarh state. And Pandu Vamsis of the Kosalas, they also, since they are associated with Mekhala, they also trace their origin from Pandavas, and their most important ruler was Indrabala. Pandu Vamsis were perhaps they were feudatories of the Guptas and Vakatakas, and by the 8th century AD, they lost their kingdom to newly emerging equations in the eastern part of India. Another dynasty which I want to mention is the Bhoj dynasty of Goa. You must have heard about the Bhoj rulers of Madhya Pradesh or Bhoj rulers of Rajasthan, but Bhoj rulers of Goa were also equally famous. And it is believed that they ruled in between 3rd century AD to 6th century AD. Moreover, they are believed to be the branch of Haihaya dynasty, which traces its lineage from the Yaduvansis of the Mathura. Devraj was the initial ruler of this dynasty, and Chandor in the modern Goa was their capital. One of the very popular and very famous area of ancient India is Kaling. Kaling is basically the coastal area between Godavari and Mahanadi river. And this area became famous under the Chedi Mahajanpad and the ruler of the Chedi Empire, Kharvela. But after the disintegration of the Kharvela Empire, many small dynasties emerged in Kalinga area. And some of the important dynasties of this area are the Matharas, Pitri Bhaktas. So let's talk about them. One of the initial important dynasty which emerged from the disintegration of the Chedi dynasty were the Matharas. And Matharas basically ruled between the Ganjam district of Odisha and Srikakulam of Andhra Pradesh. Shakti Varman was the first ruler of this dynasty, and they followed Vaishnavite faith. For the first time, it is Shakti Varman who took the title of Kalingadhipati, which means he was the lord of the Kalinga. But this dynasty was overthrown from area of Odisha and Andhra by the Pitri Bhakta dynasty. So let's talk about the next dynasty, which is Pitri Bhaktas. Pitri Bhakt dynasty ruled in between 5th and 6th century AD in the areas of southern Odisha and parts of Andhra. Uma Varman was the first ruler of this dynasty, and he defeated Mathara king Anant Sakti Varman. Moreover, he also took the title of Kalingadhipati, which means Lord of the Kalinga. Moreover, this dynasty met his final fate by defeat from Eastern Ganga dynasty. So to know about Eastern Ganga dynasty, you must see last year videos of Culture Quantum on most important topics of ancient and medieval. So with these all topics, please cover those topics also. So finally, let's talk about one last dynasty. As far as the regional kingdoms in post-Gupta and Gupta period are concerned, is the Vasishtha dynasty, which ruled in 5th century AD in the area of, once again, Odisha and Chhattisgarh and Andhra. And they were more concentrated in the Vijayanagaram district of Andhra. Guna Varman was the initial ruler of this dynasty, and Anant Varman was the last ruler. They traced their lineage to the Vasishtha Gotra. And moreover, this dynasty was the follower of Lord Shiva. They were not the followers of Vishnu, which was practiced in the Mathara dynasty. So today you learnt about important regional dynasties during the Gupta age and post-Gupta age. I hope it will help in your preparation. Moreover, the notes of these videos, my own handwritten notes, will be available in the Telegram channel, and to find the link of Telegram channel, please see below in the description. In other words, the Telegram channel is t.me/Culture Quantum. So download the handwritten notes from the Telegram channel.
अभिवादन स्वीकार कीजिए नीरज राव का कल्चर क्वांटम के इस अध्याय में. In this episode of the Culture Quantum, we are going to cover the regional dynasties of India from the ancient and medieval India, which are very important from the exam perspective, and their timeline and their important contribution has often been asked in not only UPSC prelims examination but all the exams conducted by UPSC and the several governmental bodies in India. So let's begin this journey. So let's start the journey with the Vakata kingdom of Maharashtra, which existed between 250 AD to 500 AD. And as far as the area of the Vakata kingdom is concerned, it covered the entire area of the Malwa, so as it included the areas of the Gujarat, entire Maharashtra, and it was also touching the southern borders of the Tungabhadra river. The capital of this particular kingdom was Vatsgumla, which is now the modern district of Wasim in central Maharashtra. Vindhya Sakti is believed to be the first ruler or basically the founder of this particular dynasty. But it was the Pravar Sen first who expanded the kingdom to the frontiers which I have mentioned in this video. Vakatakas were the practitioners of Hinduism, but they also patronized and promoted Buddhism and Jainism. So some of their rulers were very closer to the Buddhist faith also. Now, another very interesting and important fact about the Vakatakas, that the rock-cut cave monuments of Ajanta, like viharas and chaityas of Ajanta, they were created due to the patronage of the Vakatak ruler Hari Sen. Vakatakas were contemporary of the Guptas, and in fact they shared a very good relation with the Guptas. For example, Gupta ruler Chandragupta II married his daughter Prabhavati to Rudra Sen II, and with the support of the Vakatak ruler Rudra Sen II, Gupta ruler Chandragupta II was able to defeat Sak Satrapa of the Gujarat. And Sak Satrapa of the Gujarat were a constant threat to the Guptas, and in fact in one such incident they have kidnapped one of the Gupta ruler Ramagupta. By 500 AD, Vakatakas lost their kingdom to the Western Chalukyas, or basically the Chalukyas of Badami. But last but not the least, Vakatakas were also known for their patronage to literature. In fact, some of the Vakatak rulers, they were great composers of the Prakrit literature. For example, Pravar Sen II wrote Setubandh, which was written in Maharashtri Prakrit, and Sarva Sen wrote Hari Vijay, which was also written in Maharashtri Prakrit. And this particular literature, Hari Vijay, it tells the story of the Parija tree which was brought by Lord Krishna to the planet Earth. And moreover, it is to be remembered that these Maharashtri Prakrit, which were written at this point of time, they are one of the initial progenitors of the Marathi literature. Moving on to the next important dynasty from the ancient India, it is the Kadamba dynasty, which ruled in Karnataka in between 345 AD to 540 AD. And this dynasty was founded in 345 by Mayur Sharma. It's a very interesting name, which is used in today's time also. And their capital was Banvasi. So Banvasi was also in the middle of the Karnataka. As far as this dynasty is concerned, this was the first indigenous dynasty of the Karnataka, which started using Kannada language as the language of the soil. And from here onwards, the history of the Kannada literature is starting, and further promotion of the Kannada language started. Another important fact about the Kadamba dynasty, that they were the contemporaries of the Western Ganga dynasty. And you must not confuse the Western Ganga dynasty with the Eastern Ganga dynasty, because Eastern Ganga dynasty ruled in the Kalinga, that is Odisha, and Western Ganga dynasty was in the area of the Karnataka itself. So they were contemporaries of the Western Ganga dynasty. The most important ruler of the Kadamba dynasty was the Kakusthavarman, who expanded the kingdom, and because of which it was able to continue till 540 AD. Moving further to the third important dynasty from the ancient India, Western Ganga dynasty of the Karnataka. And this dynasty ruled in between 345 AD to 1000 AD. They ruled in the area of the southern Karnataka, which includes the areas like Kolar, Talakadu and Mysore. After the rise of the Western Chalukyas of the Badami, they accepted the overlordship of the Western Chalukyas in the middle of the 6th century AD. Though it was a small kingdom, but its contribution in the culture and literature was immense, and the further patronage to the Kannada literature continued at this point of time. Another very important fact about Western Ganga dynasty, that they were benevolent to all the faith, that is Hinduism, Buddhism and Jainism, but there was a special corner for the Jainism, and it is because of their patronage, the very important place associated with the Jainism Shravan-Belgola, and the monuments that you see at the Shravan-Belgola was created under their patronage. Apart from it, there is another place which is known as Kadamba Haldi, which is also a Jainism place. It was created under the patronage of these rulers. As already mentioned, Western Ganga kings promoted the literature. So literature was Kannada, but also the Sanskrit literature. One of the very important texts written by Western Ganga ruler was Chavundaraya Purana, and it was written by Chavundaraya in 978 AD. It is one of the finest Kannada prose written in the earliest times. Moving on to fourth important dynasty of ancient India, it is the Kalachuri dynasty, which ruled in between 550 AD to 625 AD. It was a short-lived dynasty, and the area of their rule was basically the Malwa. But then the Malwa also included the place Ujjaini, and the capital of this dynasty was Maheshmati. So Maheshmati is very closer to Ujjaini, and it can be identified with one of the sub-town of the today's Ujjain. As far as the Kalachuris are concerned, their origin is uncertain. There is no clarity about that how this dynasty originated. But then epigraphic and numismatic evidences suggest that it is during their rule first of the monuments of the Ellora and Elephanta were created. Later on, these monuments were further expanded and further created and further improvised by the Rashtrakuta ruler. But please remember that it was the Kalachuri rulers who created the initial premises of the Ellora and so as the Elephanta. And as far as their demise is concerned, they lost their power to Western Chalukya after the rise of this Chalukya branch of the Badami. Another very important dynasty from the ancient India is the Ikshvaku dynasty. As far as the Ikshvaku of the Deccan are concerned, their rule was in between 225 AD to 340 AD. They were believed to be feudatories of the Satvahanas. But later on, after the demise of the Satvahanas, their importance increased in the areas of the Nagarjuna Konda. And in fact, the earliest name of the Nagarjuna Konda, which was known as Vijaypura, and later on, under the patronage of the Ikshvaku clan, it emerged as the Nagarjuna Konda Buddhist center. But then, when it comes to the history of the Ikshvaku clan, it goes back even thousands and thousands years back. So the Ikshvaku kings of Deccan, they claim their descent from the legendary king Ikshvaku, who is believed to existed thousands and thousands years ago. And in fact, it is believed that Ikshvaku king was actually the founder of the solar dynasty, what we call Surya Vans. And it is also believed that Lord Ram was the clan of the Ikshvakus. So according to the legendary stories, Ikshvaku clan existed in the Kosala and Ayodhya was their capital. And the Ikshvakus existed in the Indian history at one time or another time, but then they remain relevant in the Indian history. In fact, such is the importance of the Ikshvaku clan that even in Jainism, it is said that Adinath Rishabdev was also the descendant of the Ikshvaku clan. Similarly, even in Buddhism, some of the scholars, they believe that even Gautam Buddha was also one of the descendant of the Ikshvaku clan. As far as the Deccan Ikshvakus are concerned, they ruled in the area between Krishna and Godavari river, and later on they also lost their power to the Chalukyas. So moving on to the dynasty which connects to the ancient India to the medieval and so as it continues till the modern, that is 1947. So it is the Eastern Ganga dynasty of the Odisha. There were three phases of this dynasty. So the very initial phase was the early Eastern Ganga dynasty phase, that is basically from 493 to 1077 AD. The second phase is the Imperial Ganga dynasty phase, 1077 to 1436 AD. And the final phase is the Khemundi Ganga dynasty phase, which is from 1436 to 1947 till the independence of India. So the early Ganga dynasty, it covered the area of today's entire Odisha, which was earlier known as Kalinga. Not only this, but they also covered the area of the Andhra Pradesh, so as touching the parts of the Telangana and so as the parts of the Chhattisgarh. The earliest capital of Ganga dynasty was Kalinganagara, which is today's Mukhalingam district of the Odisha, and later on Cuttack became their capital, which was earlier known as Kataka. Another very important thing to be noted about the Eastern Ganga dynasty, that their official language was Odia, and from here onwards Odia started to emerge as the language of this region. Moreover, Odia language emerged from the Odia Prakrit, and Prakrit are the natural languages of India. There were many varieties. Moving on further about this dynasty in today's world, it is more remembered for their world-renowned temple architectures, and some of the important temples which they have created, which still holds a very high relevance in the Hindu society, is Jagannath Temple of Puri, Sun Temple of Konark, Anant Vasudev Temple of Bhubaneswar, Narsingh Dev Temple of Seshachalam. These are some examples, and they created thousands of the temple which still exist. Last but not the least, in the medieval times, the currency of the Ganga dynasty was known as Fadam, and Fadam was also the currency of many other dynasties which were there in the different parts of the country. So as the Fadam was also the name of the currency of the Delhi Sultanate. Another important medieval dynasty is the Gajapati dynasty of Odisha, but as far as their rule is concerned, it extended from West Bengal to Andhra Pradesh. It started from the lower Ganga valley and extended till the mouth of the Kaveri river. So effectively it included the entire Odisha, parts of the West Bengal, some parts of Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, and so as the Chhattisgarh. They were also a solar dynasty, and the regime of the Gajapati rulers existed between 1434 to 1541. As far as the Gajapati rule is concerned, they are more remembered for their patronage to the Hinduism and especially Vaishnavite tradition. It was the time when the influence of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was very high in this area, and majority of the rulers of the Gajapati dynasty, they started to follow the footsteps of the Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. In the relation to this particular Vaishnavite faith, they constructed many temples, and one of the notable temple is the Kapileshwar Temple of Bhubaneswar. Gajapatis were also the solar dynasty, which means that they belong to Surya Vams. And in fact, many of the dynasties in India, they claim their descent to the sun god, just like the Ikshvaku. So lastly, due to their non-fighting nature, Gajapati rulers lost their power to Vijayanagar kingdom in the 16th century. Another very important dynasty from the medieval India was the Kakatiya dynasty, and Kakatiyas ruled entire Telangana, Andhra, parts of Odisha, and so as the parts of the upper Tamil Nadu. And their territory also included some parts of the Karnataka. As far as the Kakatiya rulers are concerned, the earliest evidence of their existence is from 800 AD. But then the first ruler who established the sovereignty was the Prataparudra I. As far as the naming of the Kakatiya rulers are concerned, they trace their name from the goddess Kakati, and goddess Kakati is believed to be the form of the goddess Durga, Ma Amba, Ma Sakti. Another thing, that Kakatiyas trace their origin to a person Durjaya, and Durjaya is believed to be the descendant of the Karikala Chola, the great Chola emperor of the early Chola phase. Ganapati Deva was the most important ruler of this dynasty, and it is during his regime the Kakatiya dynasty has reached to its maximum expanse, and its territorial climax has happened under the Ganapati Deva. The territory of the Kakatiyas at this time is in between the Godavari and the Krishna river, and moreover there is a constant struggle with the Yadava kingdom of the Devagiri. After Ganapati Deva, the next ruler of this dynasty, or next ruler of this kingdom, was Rudrama Devi. She is one of the earliest example of the female rulers in India, and she is also celebrated for her brave victory against the Yadava dynasty of the Devagiri. At the time of the Rudrama Devi, the famous Venetian traveler Marco Polo, he visited Warangal, which was the capital of the Kakatiyas. The old name of the Warangal was Orugali, and Marco Polo wrote high praises about the queen Rudrama Devi, and in fact, impressed by the bravery and the story of the Rudrama Devi, The government of India has also constituted a bravery award on her name, Rudrama Devi Award. After the regime of the Rudrama Devi, the next important ruler was the Pratap Rudra II, and Pratap Rudra II was the contemporary of the Alauddin Khilji. This is the time when Alauddin Khilji's campaign of the Warangal has started by his general, his trusted general Malik Kafur. In 1310, invasion of the Kakatiya kingdom has happened and Pratap Rudra was defeated. So now Pratap Rudra was forced by Alauddin Khilji to pay the annual tribute, and this is the time when Pratap Rudra was forced to give the famous Kohinoor diamond to Alauddin Khilji. The mysterious diamond, and the diamond which has the history of curse also. You'll get to know it at another place. Kakatiyas were one of the finest temple builders. By this point of time, already the Dravid temple architecture has completely developed, and they created one of the very famous temple, that is the Ramappa Rudreshwar temple. And this temple has now been inscribed in UNESCO heritage site. In 1323, the celebrated rule of the Kakatiyas with the attack of Tughlaq dynasty, and finally this dynasty was subsumed within the Delhi Sultanate. So moving on to one of the most important medieval dynasties, that is the Hoysala dynasty or establishment of the Hoysala kingdom. So the kingdom was in between 1000 AD to 1343. And this was the most powerful Kannadiga dynasty. They ruled entire modern Karnataka, also covering the areas from Kerala, Tamil Nadu, so as Andhra, and so as some parts of Maharashtra. The most important phase in the expansion of this kingdom happened when there was a fight between the Western Chalukyas and Kalachuris. So Hoysalas took advantage of this situation and they further expanded in the erstwhile areas of the Kalachuri and the Western Chalukya. Nripakam was the first initial important ruler who was somewhere around 1026 AD. But the most important ruler of this dynasty was Vishnuvardhan, whose regime existed from 1108 to 1152. And in 1116, King Vishnuvardhan defeated the Cholas, the imperial Cholas, who were known for their immense power in the southern India. This further improved the strength and the prestige and also the territory of the Hoysalas. Moreover, Hoysalas in today's time are more remembered for their contribution to the architectural scenario of India. They created one of the most unique and stupendous architecture of India, that is Hoysala temples. Some of the important temples in this particular category are Hoysaleshwara Temple of Halebidu, Chennakeshava Temple of Somnathpura, and Chennakeshava Temple of Belur. You can see on the screen I button. If you click on the I button, it will lead you to the details of the Hoysaleshwara temple, which has already been uploaded. Hoysala rulers also promoted the literature, and the two favored literature of their time was obviously the Kannada literature, so as the Sanskrit literature. And finally, the grand rule of the Hoysalas came to an end during the Tughlaq dynasty. The celebrated rule of Hoysalas came to a complete end in 1343 when it fell to Delhi Sultanate. And the last ruler of this dynasty was Veer Ballal Dev IV. So this name you must have heard in many movies and many places, but then this name was related to the Hoysala kings. All the dynasties that we have discussed today, the notes of all these dynasties will be available. I will be uploading on my Telegram channel. The name of the Telegram channel is Neeraj Rao AK. You can also search with Culture Quantum. You can find the Telegram channel. So please download the script of this particular video. Last suggestion from my side, or you can consider it as a request, that don't pester too much about exam, and this last week is all about revising what you have studied, and already we are contributing towards your preparation through this video. So please stick to your plan and don't give up. This is not the time to give up. All the best to all of you and do well in the exam. Hello viewers.
In the series of the most important and predictable themes for UPSC Prelims 2025, today we are going to discuss the background of the Acts of 1909 and so as 1919 and 1935. Last year in the predictable themes, you have studied about Regulating Act 1773 to Government of India Act 1935. So please revise those acts also and add the theme that we are going to discuss right now. You can expect a question from this series. So अभिवादन स्वीकार कीजिए नीरज राव का कल्चर क्वांटम के इस अध्याय में एंड नाउ वी आर गोइंग टू डिस्कस द बैकग्राउंड ऑफ द acts of 1909 and so as 1919 and 1935. So let's start with the background of the Morley Minto reforms of 1909. It is named after Secretary of State Morley and Viceroy of India Minto. The very first background information is basically the visit of the Prince of Wales to India, who was there in India in between November 1905 to March 1906. And Prince of Wales, later he went on to become King George V. So while he was returning back from India, he had a suggestion to Morley. He said that the watchword for British rule in India should be sympathy. The second important background information related to Morley Minto reforms is basically the budget speech of Gopalakrishna Gokhale in March 1906. And in this historic speech, he has appealed to the British authority that conciliation with the British authority can only be possible when educated Indians are getting associated more and more with the administration of their country. Third important factor in Morley Minto reforms is the constitution of the A.T. Arundale Committee. This committee submitted its report in October 1906 and it also talked about what would be the future reforms. Moreover, it wanted the opinion of the local governments and so as the local representatives. So by the end of 1906, the report of the committee was sent to all the local governments for their opinion. Another very important factor behind the proposed reforms in 1909 was the Aligarh movement initiated by Sir Syed Ahmad Khan. And this movement gradually alienated Hindus from the Muslims, particularly in the political field. Moreover, there was anti-Hindu feeling when the Indian National Congress was getting created by the Aligarh movement leaders. Moreover, another thing that it is believed that this mechanization was possible due to the British officials influencing Sir Syed Ahmad Khan and so as the Aligarh movement leaders. The next important impetus to the proposed reforms in 1909 was basically a delegation led by Aga Khan, and this delegation went to Simla whereby they appealed to the Viceroy of India some reforms for the Muslim community. The standout reforms or concessions that they demanded from the Viceroy includes, they asked that the representation of the Muslims, particularly political representation, must not be merely based on their numerical strength but also on the basis of the volume of their support to the British Empire and so as the effectiveness of the Muslim community in the continuation of British Empire in India. Aga Khan's delegation also appealed to the Viceroy that Muslims must get the right to send their own political representative through separate electorate. So this is the genesis of the idea of the separate electorate. They not only demanded this much, but they also demanded that there must be more participation, more inclusion of the people of the Muslim community in the civil services. In fact, they went on to say that civil services must be scrapped. They also wanted help of British in creating the Central Muslim University, and apart from it, they also wanted some sort of help of the British authority in education of the Muslim masses. Not only this, they also demanded to the British authority that there must be more number of the judges in high courts and so as the chief courts all over India. So now you got to know that what were the background info related to Morley Minto reforms of 1909. But it is to be noted that you must not be under any pre-assumption that Morley and Minto were on the same page. In fact, it was Morley who was very much against the separate electorate, and he had a point that if the Muslim masses can be given separate electorate, so in the general electorate also they will have a vote and they might have 2 votes. So he was not in the favor of separate electorate, but Minto wanted to go ahead with this divisionary tactics
to divide the unity of the Hindu and the Muslim society, and so as he is the one who favored the separate electorate provision. So let's explore the background info of Montagu-Chelmsford reforms of 1919. Montagu was the Secretary of State and Chelmsford was the Viceroy of India. And the background of this reform can be traced back to Lucknow Pact of 1916. In the Lucknow Pact of 1916, both Indian National Congress and Muslim League came together, and moreover, they have set aside their differences. They also supported each other's demands and claims, and then both of them demanded self-rule for India. This created some sort of pressure on the British authority when the two communities are coming together. The second very important reason behind the reforms of 1919 is Home Rule movement, which started in 1916 and continued very well till 1918. So Home Rule movement stirred the masses, and moreover, it created some sort of nervousness in the British officials in India. So during the Home Rule movement, when the masses were stirred, British authority tried repressive measures. They created a false case against Tilak, but this time Tilak was successfully defended by Muhammad Ali Jinnah. Then they arrested Mrs. Annie Besant, Arundale, and so as Wadia. But after the arrest of Mrs. Annie Besant, there was huge uproar all over India, and moreover, masses were turning little violent at this point of time. Looking at the reaction of the Indians, Secretary of State Montagu made a statement, a historic statement somehow related to the Indian mythology, that Shiva cut his wife into 52 pieces only to discover that he had 52 wives. This is what happens to Government of India when it interns Mrs. Annie Besant. So at the height of Home Rule movement, Mrs. Annie Besant was released, and moreover, British officials were nervous enough to appeal to the British authority in Britain that sent the reforms at an early date in India. In 1916 and 1917, Secretary of State was Austen Chamberlain, and he happened to be the first person who talked about realization of the self-government in India. So Austen Chamberlain, he made a statement. The statement was that it is not merely enough to increase the number of Indians in councils and legislatures. In fact, more responsibility must be vested in those Indians who are the part of these bodies. He further went on to say that the goal of the British government must be self-realization. He suggested to the British government that they must declare the goal in India must be development of self-governing institutions in the future course of time. And obviously, it is the British government which can decide that what timeline it must be giving, but it must be declared for the Indians. When Austen Chamberlain was Secretary of State of India, that was the time when Edwin Montagu was Under Secretary of Government of India. He also seconded the opinion of Chamberlain, and he also went on to say that the Government of India is too wooden, too iron, too inelastic, too antediluvian to be of any use for the modern purposes that we have in view. Another very important background info related to Montagu-Chelmsford reform is the post-World War I scenario. During the World War I, that is from 1914 to 1918, large number of Indians supported British effort during World War I, and they had an expectation that after the war is over, substantial greater political autonomy would be given to the Indians. So, British cannot deny the fact that Indians have not supported them, and to seek their further association, they have to give in something to Indians. On this note, Under Secretary of India, Edwin Montagu made a statement: if you want to use the loyalty of Indians, you must give them higher opportunity to controlling their own destinies. And it created a great excitement in India. The political leadership of India welcomed the statement of Edwin Montagu, and so was the excitement that British appointed Edwin Montagu as the Secretary of State of India in July 1917. So after his appointment as the Secretary of State of India, Edwin Montagu made a historic statement on 20th of August 1917, and moreover, this statement is also called as August Offer of the Montagu. So what he exactly said: the policy of His Majesty Government in India, with which the Government of India is in complete accord, is that increasing association of Indians in each and every branch of administration and gradual development of
self-governing institution with progressive realization of the responsible government of India as an integral part of the British Empire. So now you studied the background of Montagu-Chelmsford reforms of 1919. I would request you go through the last year video also and see that what were the provisions of the Montagu-Chelmsford reforms of 1919. As you know that no matter how difficult or easy the UPSC paper is, you will be getting a question from the acts, and that is from 1773 to 1935. So please add those portions to these background info also. Third and the most important act as far as the foundational principles of the self-governing institutions in India is concerned is the Government of India Act 1935. Government of India Act 1935 also served as a foundational principle to guide the writing of the Indian Constitution from 1946. So let's look at the background of the Government of India Act 1935. The very first thing goes back to the constitution of the Simon Commission. So Simon Commission was constituted on the recommendation of Alexander Muddiman Committee, which was constituted in 1924. And the Alexander Muddiman Committee recommended the creation of Indian Statutory Commission, which came to be known as the Simon Commission, to review the provisions of 1919 Act and further recommend the new constitutional measures. But there was one thing about Simon Commission which egged all the Indian nationalists. That is, not even a single Indian, the most moderate, the most liberal, was the part of a commission which was going to decide the constitutional fate of India. Despite the appeals from the Indian nationalist side, not even a single Indian was accommodated when the commission was in India. So commission headed for the discussions with the provincial governments and the important leaders of India. But on the other hand, all the national parties of India, they initiated Simon boycott. So after the consultations were over, what were the recommendations of the Simon Commission? And you must remember the recommendation of the Simon Commission. So the recommendation of the Simon Commission was, it wanted end of the diarchy from the provinces. Then apart from it, it also suggested that there must be separation of Burma from the Indian government. Then it also made a case for the protection of the minority rights. And very important that it suggested that there must be continuation of the communal electorate to safeguard the rights of the minorities in India. And in fact, these recommendations were accepted in the Government of India Act 1935 with a thumping majority. The second important background info related to 1935 Act is basically the conduct of the 3 roundtable conferences. And these 3 roundtable conferences were conducted because of the demand from the Indian side to give more autonomy to the Indian leaders in the governance of their country. So 3 roundtable conferences were conducted in Britain, and in all these 3 roundtable conferences, all the major parties of India, including Indian National Congress, and the representatives of the different communities were invited. So Congress participated in just 2nd roundtable conference. It did not participate in the 1st and the 3rd roundtable conference. So in the roundtable conference, series of negotiations, series of discussions happened. And after that, whatever the recommendations of the 3 roundtable conference, it got reflected in the Government of India Act 1935. The third important juncture in the realization of the 1935 Act was announcement of British Prime Minister Ramsay MacDonald, that is Communal Award, in 1932. This Communal Award was related to giving separate electorate to the depressed classes of India, and they would not be identified with the Hinduism. But these announcements led to some controversies also. In fact, Gandhi and Ambedkar were on the different page, and despite their differences, they agreed for Pune Pact, which later got reflected in the Government of India Act 1935. The last important background info of 1935 Act is the white papers based on the recommendations of the 3 roundtable conferences. These white papers are the policy measures to be implemented in India, were proposed in the British Parliament, and finally, after its acceptance, the Government of India Act was passed in the British Parliament in 1935, which further led to greater provincial autonomy in India. And as you also know, that it also proposed the scheme of a kind of federal government. But though the federation never became operational because some of the criteria were not fulfilled. So once again, I would suggest and recommend to you that please go through the video of the Culture Quantum of last year,
where I have covered all the acts from 1773 to 1935, and please see all the provisions of the 1935 Act. One additional important topic from modern Indian history I would like to add is the life and the times of Dr. Muthulakshmi Reddy. She was born in Madras province, and moreover, she happens to be one of the initial medical practitioners of India. So she was a social reformer, she was a medical practitioner, and so as she was also Padma Bhushan awardee after the India's independence. When it comes to Dr. Muthulakshmi Reddy, there were many first to her name. The very first thing is that she happened to be the first female student who was admitted in a men's college. Then apart from it, she also happened to be the first women legislator of India, and she was elected in the Madras Corporation in 1926. Moreover, in the later times of her life, she came under the influence of Gandhi and Annie Besant, and she participated in the national movement also. One very well-known personality from the Indian freedom struggle, you also must be aware about him, that is Madan Mohan Malviya ji. Madan Mohan Malviya ji studied law and Sanskrit from Calcutta University, and later on he went on to found Banaras Hindu University in 1916, which went on to become the biggest residential campus university in Asia. So apart from it, what were the literary contributions of the Madan Mohan Malviya ji? That is something which is important for this year exam. So one contribution of Madan Mohan Malviya ji was writing the Hindi rendition of the epic written by Tulsidas, Ramcharitmanas. Then moreover, he also wrote a very famous article, Hindu-Muslim Unity, the Need of the Hour. And with this article, he has appealed for the communal harmony. Apart from it, he has also edited the newspapers like Hindustan and Abhyuday. Two more literature authored by Madan Mohan Malviya ji is Rashtriya Shiksha and Bharat Darshan, in which he is emphasizing on the education as the need of the hour for the development of India, and so as his love for India and India's culture in Bharat Darshan. Later on, in 2014, Madan Mohan Malviya ji, posthumously, he was awarded Bharat Ratna. Another very important personality from the freedom struggle phase of India is Tangaturi Prakasam Pantulu. He came to limelight during the Simon Commission's visit to India, and when the Simon boycott was going on, when Simon Commission visited Andhra, he was the one who spearheaded the campaign of boycott against the Simon Commission. Moreover, he was threatened by the British authority that if he moves ahead, he will be shot dead. But he was not fearful about anything, and he moved ahead bare-chested, and he claimed that if they really want to kill, they can kill him. He earned the title of Andhra Kesari, or Lion of Andhra, and later on in 1953, he went on to become the first Chief Minister of Andhra. Slogans played a very vital role in galvanizing the masses during the mass movement. So one of the very famous slogans in 1920s was Inqilab Zindabad. And when we talk about Inqilab Zindabad, so the name which comes to the mind is Bhagat Singh. But in reality, this slogan, this very evocative slogan was written by Hazrat Mohani Sahab in 1921, and later on it was popularized by Bhagat Singh and his comrades. Another very important slogan which was popular during the national movement and 1920s itself, that is Simon Go Back. So Simon Go Back slogan was written by Yusuf Meher Ali, and not only this, but it was Yusuf Meher Ali who also wrote the slogan or created the slogan Quit India. So please remember that these two slogans, and moreover who were the writers of these slogans. So I hope that this series of important and predictable topics of the modern Indian history will be very helpful to you in this year prelims, and you come out with the flying colors in this prelims of 2025. So wishing you best of luck for this year exam.
अभिवादन स्वीकार कीजिए नीरज राव का कल्चर क्वांटम के इस अध्याय में. As promised, this episode is about modern Indian history, and in this episode I am going to cover all the important acts starting from 1773 till 1935. As you know, every year there are questions from this particular section, and it is one of the very important topic from the modern Indian history. So let's start this episode from the background of the administration of the British East India Company in India.
Company in India was managed by 24 court of directors, and these 24 court of directors were highest decision making body. They were appointed by the shareholders of the company, and they were also called as court of proprietors. Day-to-day affair of the company was managed by different committees created from these 24 court of directors. In India, there were 3 presidencies of the company, and these were Bengal, Bombay and Madras. In each of the presidency, there was a president and there was a governor in council. Each and every decision of the company was taken with the majority vote of the council. So this is what was the structure before 1773. In 1773, the situation arose whereby there was a need of the regulation of the affairs of the company. So what was the background of the Regulating Act of the 1773? By 1773, Bengal has come under the control of the British East India Company. And after the Treaty of Allahabad, 1765, dual system of administration was implemented in the Bengal, whereby the financial administration or revenue administration, that is Diwani function, was in the hands of the British East India Company, and the Nizamat function or civil administration was in the hands of the Bengal Nawab, who was controlled by the British East India Company. So it was a dual system of government, but in reality it was a dual system of operation of the people of Bengal. And moreover, there were many other issues. There was a severe famine of 1770, and people were reeling under the pressure of the severe famine of the 1770, which swiped near about 1/3 population of the Bengal. Apart from it, there were charges against the company officials that they have amassed so much of corrupt wealth that they can be better called as the Nawabs of London. And in fact, it was very much verified by a secret committee which was appointed by the British Parliament that corruption was very high in the company, and one of the reasons was the private trade. At this point of time, the British Parliament and the British Crown did not want it to be mute spectator when the people of Bengal and the people of India were reeling under pressure, and they wanted to have a say in the company's administration, and the opportunity came. So opportunity was basically company, because of the corruption, was on the verge of bankruptcy in 1770s, and in 1772 company applied for £1 million loan to the British Parliament. Parliament grabbed this opportunity to regulate the affairs of the company, and that's how the regulation of the company started in the form of various acts and commissions. So let's start the very first act, which is the Regulating Act of 1773. The very first provision, the president of company's factory at Bengal or Calcutta was made the governor of British Indian territories. He is not the Governor General of India, but he is the governor of the British Indian territory, and moreover, the governors of or presidents of Bombay and Madras were made subservient to him. Number 2, to assist Governor General, a 4-member governor in council was created in Bengal, and these 4 members were directly appointed by the British Crown. Each and every decision in the council was taken with the majority vote. So effectively there were 5 members, 1 Governor General and 4 other executive members of the council. Number 3, it banned private trade, and company officials were not allowed to indulge in any private trade. Number 4, company officials were asked to provide all the details related to the wealth that they have acquired in India, and this detailed statement must be submitted to the British Parliament. Number 5, the Act led the foundation of the Supreme Court at Calcutta, with Eliza Impey as the first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court and 3 other judges. Moving ahead with the defects of the Regulating Act of the 1773. Primarily there were 3 defects. Number 1, Governor General was rendered powerless in his council, as all the 4 executive members often outvoted him and he was not able to take any decision. Number 2, the provisions related to the Supreme Court were quite vague and not clearly defined. In fact, there was often a clash between the judicial authority of Governor General and so as Supreme Court. And number 3, despite Bombay and Madras being subservient, they acted on their discretion and they often did not pay any heed to the instructions or the decisions of the Warren Hastings or Governor of the Bengal. So looking at the defects of the Regulating Act of 1773, in 1781 the Amendment Act was passed, and the Amendment Act of 1781 addressed one problem, that is the clear demarcation of the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court and Governor General, and now Governor General powers were kept above the Supreme Court, and there was no such case Act, that is Pitt's India Act of 1784. It was named after the British Prime Minister William Pitt the Younger. This particular act tried to solve the defects of the Regulating Act of the 1773. The very first and the important provision of Pitt's India Act is it led to the beginning of joint rule of British Crown and the British East India Company in India. Moreover, the ultimate authority was with the British Crown, not with the British East India Company. Accordingly, number second provision, Board of Control was created, which was the representative of the British Crown, and it was having 6 members. Board of Control was headed by the Secretary of State, and Secretary of State later on he will become an important position after 1858. But then please remember that Secretary of State was the President of the Board of Control from 1784 itself. And who is Secretary of State? He is one of the Cabinet Minister in the British Parliament. Number 3. To give more powers and to give more importance to Governor General, it was decided that one executive member will be removed from his council, so that if he gets the support of one member, so with the casting vote he can go ahead with his decision. So now effectively there are 4 members in the Governor General Executive Council, 1 Governor General, and so as the 3 executive members. Number 4, the independent powers of the Bombay and Madras was taken away, and now they were made completely subordinate to Bengal. So now they were completely subordinate to Bengal in the matters of war, revenue, legislation, everything. Earlier they were just subordinate, but it was not defined in what sense, but now in every sense they have been made subordinate in 1784. It's an important point to remember. Number 5, for the first time the company's position in India was called as British possession in India. And another provision of this particular act, we can say that number 6 provision was Pitt's India Act of 1784. It forbade company to interfere in the native affairs of India, but this was seldom observed. As far as the defects of the 1784 is concerned, it was also not able to achieve much success. The reason is the nebulous connection developed between the Board of Control and Court of Director, and the relationship was highly subjective. Moreover, still the corruption continued because there was no effective control and there was no effective mechanism at the place. Other than that, Governor General was still rendered powerless because once again the 3 executive members were ganging together and outvoting the Governor General Warren Hastings. The next important act was Charter Act of 1793. Charter Act of 1793 renewed the company's charter for next 20 years. That means that till 1813, the company's powers will be intact in India and their monopoly will be intact in India. What are the other provisions related to it? In 1785, new Governor General Cornwallis was appointed, and he demanded overriding power in his council. Initially, he was given overriding power, but in 1786, with the Special Act of the Parliament, he was further given overriding power in his councils. Second important provision of this act is it allowed a company to increase its dividend by 10%. One of the very important provision of this act was redefining and reorganizing the courts in India. Earlier, there used to be the revenue courts, which were called as the Mal Adalats, and now revenue administration was completely divorced from judiciary functions, and it also led to the disappearance of the Mal Adalats. Next important provision of the Charter Act of the 1793 is that it called for written laws in India, and it maintained that the rule of India or the governance of India must not be based on the personal rule of the rulers, but in fact written rules must be there or written laws must be there. It also said that all these laws and the written rules must be translated in Indian languages also, so that the people can know about their rights and immunities. Last but not the least, it also said that the salaries of the Governor General will not be paid from the British Exchequer, but it will be paid from the Indian revenues. The next important phase in the company's administration is the Charter Act of 1813. So we need to know a little bit of the background of the Charter Act of the 1813. There was a hell lot of pressure which was created by the British industrialist on the British Parliament to end the monopoly of the company. What was the reason? The reason was rise of Napoleon in France and in Europe, and Napoleon created continental system. Many of the European countries were allied with the continental system, and Napoleon barred any kind of trade with the Britain. So in fact, Britain was at this point of time at the climax of the Industrial Revolution. There were so many manufactured goods to offer to the public, but then there was no market. So at this point of time, these British industrialists, they wanted access to the market of India and China, which was monopolized by the British East India Company. And it is also said that Adam Smith's theory of laissez-faire or free trade theory was also very popular at this point of time, and everybody created pressure citing the name of the Adam Smith laissez-faire. So Charter Act of 1813 was passed in the background of this particular continental system and the rise of Napoleon. Let's come to the provisions. Provision number 1 of this particular act. The company's charter was renewed for next 20 years, but then now it is ending the company's monopoly of trade in India. The company's monopoly of trade in India ended in many of the aspects, but company was able to retain its monopoly in the tea trade in India and also its monopoly with trade with China. Next important provision of this act was, this act allowed the Christian missionaries to go to India and promote Christianity and promote moral and religious education in India. The third important provision of this act was, this act allocated 1 lakh rupees from the Indian revenues for the promotion of education among the Indian subjects. But unfortunately, this money was not made available for many years due to the debate and discussion on mode of education. That is, mode of education must be vernacular or English medium. So it was finally solved in 1833 when William Bentinck was the Governor General of India. The next important provision of this act, that this act empowered local governments to impose taxes on the people, but it was subject to the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. Only those areas which were there in the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, the local governments of these area only can impose the taxes on the people. Moving on to the most important Charter Act, that was the Charter Act of the 1833. It was also called as St. Helena Act. Let's look at the provisions of the Charter Act of the 1833. Very first, it completely ended the monopoly of the company, be it the tea trade in India, so as trade with China. So now company is no more having any monopoly in any part. Number 2, all the other companies from Britain, now they were allowed to operate in these all places, and this is the act which led to the legal colonization of India. Next important provision. In 1784 Act, 1 member was removed from the Governor General Council, but now in this act, once again a 4th member was added to the Governor General Council. It is to be noted that the 4th member was the legislative member and he was not the permanent member of the Executive Council. His work was only for the purpose of the legislation, that is rule making, and he was not entitled to vote. So effectively there are 3 executive members and 1 legislative member, and the first legislative member of the Governor General Council was Lord Macaulay. The next important provision of this act was establishment of the first Indian Law Commission. Lord Macaulay was the chairman of the first Indian Law Commission, and this commission was entitled to codify the Indian Penal Code and so as Civil Procedure Code and Criminal Procedure Code of India, and that's how these all act became a reality by 1860s. Section 87 of the Act provided for the education and the employment of Indians in the British services, and it also maintained that there be no discrimination on the basis of race, caste, religion, place of birth or descent. It was the first act which maintained that there would be free admission of Indians in the British administration, or in other words we can say that this was the first act which made a provision to freely admit Indians into the administration without any discrimination. Another provision of this act is that it recommended the Haileybury College in London must make the quota for the future civil servants from India. Though it was not taken seriously, but the provision was mentioned in the 1833 Act. Now coming to the most important part of the 1833 Act is Governor General of Bengal was now made Governor General of India, And Lord William Bentinck in 1833 became the first Governor General of India. He was the most powerful Governor General till this date. All the financial and political powers were vested in his hand, and moreover, he was entitled to repeal, amend, alter any law or regulation. The only condition was it must be approved by the Court of Directors who were acting under the Board of Control. So only the Court of Directors can disapprove his action, nobody else can disapprove his action. It is to be noted. The next important provision of this act, that this act called for the upliftment of the slaves in India. Another important provision of this act, that this act led to the split in the Bengal presidency and creation of the Agra from the Bengal presidency. Moving on to the next important provision of this act was, it was said that while drafting any law, the rights of the heads of the Indian families must be taken into the consideration, and also the rights related to the marriage or tradition, customs related to the marriage must also be respected while drafting the law. So moving on to the last Charter Act, that is the Charter Act of the 1853. Unlike the other Charter Acts, this Charter Act, though it renewed the company's charter, but it did not fix any timeline for the continuation of the company's administration. So it means that now it was very clear that very soon or any time soon company can be asked to wind up its operation. Which kind of operation? So basically the administrative operations. Already they have winded up their commercial operations in 1833. Let's move to the next provision of this particular act. This particular act reduced the number of the Court of Directors from 24 to 18, and out of these 18 Court of Directors, 6 were to be appointed or nominated by the British Crown. Another very important provision of this act, or I would say it is the most important provision of this act, now the separation of the Legislative Council with the Executive Council. So now a separate Legislative Council, Governor General Legislative Council, was created with 6 new members. So it is clear indication of the separation of power. Next important provision of this act, out of the 6 new members who were to be the part of the Governor General Legislative Council, 4 were to be recommended by, or 4 were to be chosen by the local governments. Please don't get confused. Local government does not mean the Indian governments or the Indian princely state government. It is basically the local governments of Bombay, Madras, Calcutta and Agra. And moreover, it was also mentioned that those British who have at least completed 10 years in the services of the company, they will be entitled to be nominated in the council. One of the very important provision of this particular Charter Act of 1853 is that it called for entry of Indians in the covenanted civil services, and now it is going to throw open the civil services exam to the Indians. Now Indians would be the part of the civil services, but on the basis of the exam which is to be conducted by the British government. In this regard, to make the syllabus and further make recommendation related to the entry of Indians, once again Macaulay Committee was constituted in 1854. So accordingly, when the exams were thrown open to Indians and exam was conducted, so first Indian to clear this exam was Satyendranath Tagore, who was recommended in 1864. After 4 years of the Charter Act of the 1853, in 1857, the mighty revolt of 1857 happened, and it changed the entire scenario in India, which led to the transfer of power from British East India Company to the British Crown. So after the suppression of the revolt of 1857, in 1858, there was Queen Victoria's Declaration and also Government of India Act 1858. So let's look at the Queen Victoria's proclamation, what she promised to Indians in her proclamation of 1858. Queen Victoria's proclamation was read out by Governor General Canning at a darbar held at Allahabad. And in this particular proclamation, Queen disclaimed any intention of conquest in India, and she also assured that the rights of the Indian princely states would be respected. She also assured Indians that the traditions, customs, usages, rights and beliefs of the Indians would be respected. It also maintained that the British rule will be based on the justice and benevolence, and it further said that Indians would be incorporated into the rule making and so as in the administration without any discrimination on the basis of the caste, creed, religion and place of birth. So Queen Victoria's proclamation came along with the Government of India Act 1858, And some quick provisions of the Government of India Act 1858 are as follows. So very first, now the designation of the Governor General also became the Viceroy of India. Many of you must be confused that what is the difference between Governor General of India and Viceroy of India. The single person was Governor General also and the Viceroy also. So basically, as Viceroy, he is the representative of the British Crown, and as Governor General, he is the administrative head of India. So single person acted in both the capacities. And the first Governor General and the Viceroy was obviously Viceroy Canning or Governor General Canning. Moving on to the next important provision of this particular act. Secretary of State, who was the cabinet minister and who also used to be the president of the Board of Control, now he was made responsible for the Government of India. And moreover, to assist Secretary of State, a 15-member Council of India was created, and this is the Council of India which will be further expanded, and it will lead to the creation of the many legislative assemblies in India, be it the Central Legislative Assembly or the Provincial Legislative Assembly. And last but not the least, this is the act which transferred the power from British East India Company to the British Crown, and now the subjects of India would be under the rule of the Crown of the Britain. Since the Government of India Act 1858 came very quickly, so the council provisions were not very elaborated. So there was need of elaborative council provisions. So accordingly, the first Council Act came in 1861. Let's look at the provision of this particular act. Now, it was realized by the British government and the British Crown that they cannot neglect the Indians, and Indians must be incorporated into the rule-making process. So this act led to the inclusion of Indians as non-official members in the Central Legislative Council, which is also called as Imperial Legislative Council. You might be thinking that what is the Central Legislative Council? It is basically the 15-member council which was created earlier, and now it will be having more members. So what is non-official and official? Official members would be the British and non-official member would be the Indians. So now Indians are incorporated into the councils as non-official members. So initially there were 3 Indian members who were included in the Governor General's Council as non-official member. And who were they? So they were Raja of Banaras, Raja of Patiala and Sir Dinkar Rao. And their appointment was for 2 years, and then after 2 years, once again their fate would be decided. Another very important provision of this act, that Governor General or Viceroy was now entitled to go ahead with the portfolio system. And what is portfolio system? Basically creation of the different departments like Department of Agriculture, Department of Education, Department of Health, etc. Another very important provision is Governor General can veto the advice or aid of his members in the council, and this has to be done only on the emergency matters. Apart from it, Governor General was also entitled to issue ordinances in the emergency situations. And if a question is asked that from where we can trace the beginning of the ordinances, so that would be the Indian Councils Act of 1861. Council Act of 1861 also called for establishment of the provincial legislative councils, and accordingly the provincial legislative councils were created in Bengal, Punjab and Northwest Frontier Province, and by the time of the 1892 it was also created in Awadh. So moving on to the Indian Councils Act of 1892. Indian Councils Act of 1892 called for increment in the number of the non-official members, or basically increment in the numbers of the Indians in the legislative councils. So by this point of time, out of the 24 members of the provincial council, only 5 were Indians. Though it is an increment, but then it is not a very great increment in the number of the Indians in the councils. Apart from it, the Indian members of the provincial and the central councils, they were allowed to ask questions on the budget, but it is to be noted that they will have to give a 6-day notice prior to it. Another very important thing is to be noted that Indian members were not allowed to ask supplementary question. And another important provision of this act, that some of these Indians who were the part of the councils, their nomination method was kind of an indirect election method. But it is to be noted, nowhere in the act the word election was mentioned. So now moving on to the 20th century and the acts which were there in the initial decades of the 20th century till the independence of India. So the very first one, Indian Councils Act of 1909, which is also called as Morley Minto Reforms. Morley Minto Reform signifies the names of the Morley and Minto. Minto was the Viceroy of India and Morley was the Secretary of India. So let's look at the important provisions of this act. This act further increased the number of the Indians in the central and the provincial legislative councils. Another very important provision related to the Indian members is some of the members who were nominated in the provincial councils, their nomination was happening through the electoral college, and this electoral college was having members like the privileged class of India, like the rich traders, rich merchants, business class, group of teachers, professors, etc. So basically it was an income based electoral college. The Indian members of the provincial and the central council, now they were given more powers related to the discussion on budget. Now the Indian members were allowed to discuss budget and also vote on the separate budget items. Apart from it, they were also allowed to ask the supplementary questions. The most discriminatory and the most cancerous provision of this particular act was the introduction of the separate electorate or the communal electorate. So now in this act, the Muslim community was given separate electorate, which means that if in a constituency, if election has to happen, so the candidates would be Muslims and the voters would be Muslims, no matter how the state, and basically he will also be managing the transferred subjects. The next important provision of this particular act was introduction of the bicameral legislation at the center. So in the bicameral legislation, the upper house was created for the 3 years, and moreover there were total 145 members in the upper house. Out of them 41 were nominated and rest of them, that is 104, were elected. On the other hand, the upper house, the Council of State, had 60 members. Another very important provision of this, or basically the dividing provision of this act, which is the continuation of the divide and policy rule from the 1909, is the extension of the separate electorate for the Anglo-Indian community, Indian Christian community, and so as the Sikh community. The next important provision of this act was basically, it called for giving voting rights to the women, but it was in the realm of the provincial governments to decide when, how and where they will be giving voting rights or franchise to the women. Another very important takeaway from this act is the ministers were responsible to legislature but not the executive councillors. So finally, Government of India Act 1935. The provisions of the Government of India Act 1935 were the results of discussions in the 3 Round Table Conference, recommendations of the Simon Committee, reports of the Joint Select Committee, and also the White Papers. It also included the recommendations of the Secretary of the State Samuel Hoare. So Coming to the provisions of the Government of India Act 1935, very first one. This act proposed the creation of the All India Federation, and this All India Federation would be comprising of the British ruled provinces and so as the Indian princely states. But there was a condition in the creation of the All India Federation. The condition was half of the princely state must give their consent to join the federation, and the secondary condition was that in the joining princely states, their aggregate population must be more than 50% of the total population of the princely states. As none of these criteria were fulfilled, the All India Federation never became operational. Moving on to the next important provision. This particular act, it removed the diarchy from the provinces and it initiated diarchy in the center. Looking at the provinces, diarchy was removed and provincial autonomy was sought to be provided. Apart from it, bicameral legislation was introduced in the 6 of the provinces out of the 11 provinces of the British India. So these 6 provinces where the bicameral legislation or two-house legislation or two-house provision was introduced. These includes UP, Bihar, Odisha, Bombay, Madras and Bengal. These places bicameral legislation was introduced. Moving on to the next important provision of this act, that is the diarchy at the center. So similar to the diarchy at the provinces which was there in the 1909, now at the center, 2 authorities were created, Governor General with his Executive Council and Governor General with the popular ministers. So Governor General with the Executive Council were managing reserved subjects and Governor General with the popular ministers, they were managing the transferred subjects. It also created the 3 lists of the legislation, that is provincial, federal and concurrent list of legislation. Another thing that many of the institutions of the Government of India trace their origin to this particular act. So for example, this particular act led to the establishment of the Federal Court of India, which is right now Supreme Court of India, then Federal Public Service Commission of India, which is right now Union Public Service Commission of India, and so as the Provincial Public Service Commissions, that is right now State Public Service Commissions. It also led to the establishment of the Federal Bank of India, which is right now known as Reserve Bank of India. Next important provision, this act enfranchised approximately 10 to 14% of the population of India. This act also called for the establishment of the federal railways in India, and that's how railways came under the central government authority. Another very important provision of this act is that it called for separate electorate for the women, though women did not ask for it, but it was a good provision and it was given to the women at this point of time. Apart from it, there was also mention of the separate electorate for the depressed classes, but due to the Pune Pact between Gandhi and Ambedkar, this particular separate electorate for the depressed classes was later amended, and then Pune Pact became the part of the Government of India Act 1930. Least, I want to add one very important topic from the medieval India and the ancient India. It is one of the practice which is prevalent in India from thousands and thousands of years. So in the last year paper there was mention of Vatikrutal. Vatikrutal was the practice whereby the Sangam age kings, they were dying facing north direction, and this death was done by fasting. Very similar to this practice of the Vatikrutal, there are some practices which existed in the Rajasthan. I hope all of you must have heard about the Johar. What is Johar? Johar is basically when the dignity of the women is on the stake, her honor, her respect is on the stake. So she has taken permission from the husband that in this situation she can take her life by jumping in the burning log of the woods. So many such instances of the Johar you must have heard from Rajasthan and many Rajput kingdoms. But apart from the Johar, there is another tradition which existed in the Rajput kingdoms of the Rajasthan and so as the many other areas of India, particularly the northwest and the central India. So what is this? This is called a Sak ritual. So there are many ways of doing the Sak ritual. First of all, when the women have committed Johar to safeguard their dignity, honor and pride, men also commit Sak ritual whereby in the morning they will be taking the bath and then they will also be advancing towards that particular burning log of the wood and they will be sacrificing their life. In another situation, to safeguard their dignity if they are surrounded by the enemies. So the soldiers would be taking each other's life to safeguard their dignity. This is also the Sak ritual, and one of the best example of the Sak ritual is the Raja Hambir Dev of Ranthambore Fort. When Alauddin Khilji entered into the Ranthambore Fort, and then Raja Hambir Dev realized that he cannot win against the Alauddin Khilji. So what he did, that he went atop his Shiv temple, and there he cut his head with his own hand. That was also the Sak ritual. So it's not just the women who commit Johar, but also the men also committed this kind of brave act to safeguard their dignity. Another question which was there in the last year paper, which actually led to confusion among the people, that what has been asked, and it was actually a name of the coin which was asked in the last year paper, that is Pranam. So there were many such coins in the medieval India. Just remember the name, that is Jittal, Tanka, Adha, Bikh, Bahloli, Hastagani, Dukani, Sultani, Muhammadi, Varaha, Jalali, Muhar, Asarfi, etc. So with this, we are ending this episode of the Culture Quantum, and the team Culture Quantum has tried to bring important topics from the ancient medieval art and culture and modern Indian history. I hope it will help you, and in this last week, I would just request to you, revise, revise and revise. In this last week, don't panic, be cool, calm and composed, and have faith in the God. Team Culture Quantum wishes you all the best and perform well in the exam.
So hello guys, you have heard a lot about Pasupati seal, unicorn seal, and so as the people leaf seal of Indus Valley civilization. Now the live demonstration is there. So now you can see that in the middle there is this image of the so-called Adi Shiva, and moreover the animals which are surrounding him. So you can see these all animals, that bull, then rhino, tiger and elephant. Then antelopes are there on the lower part. Coming to the next one, which is this people leaf seal, that I have told you a number of the time that people leaf seal is indicative of nature worship in Indus Valley civilization. Now you can have a look at it. And coming to the next one is one very popular, that is unicorn seal in Indus Valley civilization. So this is a great depiction of the different type of the seals which were there in Indus Valley civilization. You can have a look at it. One of the very frequently asked questions in UPSC Civil Services examination is terms and terminology based on Buddhism and Jainism, particularly from Prakrit and Pali language. So आपको इसमें मदद मिले, इसलिए हम start कर रहे हैं important terms and terminologies from Buddhism and Jainism. So let's explore the journey. So the first term from Buddhism and Jainism, Arhat in Buddhism and Arihant in Jainism. What does it mean? It means the monk who has abandoned all the delusions so that he will never be born in samsara. What is samsara in the Oriental tradition? And Oriental tradition is basically Hinduism, Buddhism and Jainism. Samsara means the cycle of death and birth. And once they have abandoned all the delusions, they will never be born in the samsara. That's the meaning of the Arhat. Second important term from Buddhism is Bodhicitta. What does Bodhicitta means? Bodhicitta means the mind of enlightenment. Basically, it refers to the person who aspires to attain full enlightenment. In fact, it also refers to the person who wants to get enlightened and wants to enlighten others also. So Bodhicitta, once again, it is mind of enlightenment. Another very important terminology from Buddhism is Tathagat. It is an epithet which was given to the Buddha. And moreover, it is a Sanskrit and Pali word which means thus he has come, thus he has gone. So there are many interpretations of this word Tathagat. And going by one of the interpretation which is there in the Buddhism, it means that Buddha is beyond the transitory process. He is not bound by coming to this earth and going from this earth. So he is not bound by the transitory processes. And he is always there, he will always be there, he may not be visible. But then his teachings are. Another very important term often used in Buddhism is paramita. What is paramita? It is 10 perfections which are required for embarking on the path of the Buddhahood. So one must be thinking that what is Buddhahood? As per the Buddhist tradition, Buddhahood is basically becoming of Buddha. And before becoming Buddha, the persons go through the process of being Bodhisattvas. So that's how. Bodhisattvas are the previous birth of the Buddha, and when they attain all the paramitas, they embark on the path of Buddhahood. Let's look at some other important terms from Buddhism. So another very important term from Buddhism is Upasak. What is Upasak? The lay followers of Buddhism are called as Upasak. Then another very important term from Buddhism is Sakyamuni. So Sakyamuni is another epithet which has been given to Gautam Buddha, and it is basically indicative of his Sakya clan. Then let's talk about another very important term from Buddhism, that is Upekha. What is Upekha? Upekha is equanimity. What is Brahma Vihar in Buddhism? These are the four noble qualities of heart and mind which can be achieved through meditative processes. The four Brahma Viharas are Metta, which means loving kindness. Second, Karuna, which means compassion. Third, Mudita, which means appreciative joy. And fourth is Upekha, which means equanimity.